It began with an above-average rain and snow in the Midwest during the 1992-93 winter. Record-setting rains aggravated the wet conditions during the spring of '93. A stalled weather system pumped massive amounts of warm, moist air into the upper Mississippi River Valley during May, June, and July. Record-setting floods were inevitable. The flooding Mississippi and Illinois rivers poured out of their banks, severely testing the vast flood control levee systems, which were already waterlogged after months of record-setting rains. The pattern of flooding followed that of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, and the other upper Mississippi Basin states. As the local authorities were overwhelmed by the mounting disaster, they called upon state agencies for assistance. On July 4th, 1993, the governor of Illinois called out the National Guard. And together with thousands of civilian workers and volunteers, the Illinois National Guard began its longest and one of its largest peacetime state active duty missions during the Great Flood of '93.
First alert we got was, that I've got from the governor's office, was on the 4th of July, the evening of the 4th of July, and they asked that I put 150 guardsmen on in Quincy, Illinois, as a contingency force for emergencies. We did that. Fortunately, 205 showed up instead of 150 the next morning because of being the holidays. A lot of kids, we left the message on their answer machine. They didn't call back, see if they was still needed. They just grabbed their gear and showed up. But fortunately, we needed all 205 of them that day. And because the next day we were asking for more, we was up to 350 the next day, and it just kept growing from there.
But if the levee breaks, remember, don't run down the levee. Run along the top, away from the breaks, okay? You're on top of the levee. You can be picked off, okay? You don't want to run down because that's where the water's going to go. It's going down the bottom.
The initial call-up at first was getting a little slow, but as the media got into it and as the crisis began to heighten, that response became rather rapid. We had one unit out of Champaign-Urbana area, one battalion, the 2nd Battalion, the 130 was called basically the first week, the middle of the first week. They, one night, we called them, said send us 200 more. We'd had 200, we told them send us 200 more. Within 6 hours after we called, they were flying into the Quincy airport on the Chinooks. That's how fast it went. And so from that time forward, usually within 12 hours, we had troops on the back coming in on the ground after we made the call to the unit to get them here. Initially, we started in East Dubuque, which is up on the northeast corner of Illinois. We had about 50 soldiers up there that did some levee work, patrol work, and then they helped work on some homes in that area for about a week, and they were back out of there in about a week's time.
We're just overwhelmed with the support they gave us and the tremendous job they did. I would have liked to keep every one of them in our community as permanent residents. That's how nice of people they were, and I was awful proud of the young people in it. It's a relatively young organization, and those kids just worked their tails off, really. I sure changed my mind on those National Guard people. I thought there were a lot of them in it just for that weekend money, but you'll never convince me anymore. They're dedicated people.
The first week, everybody averaged 18 to 20-hour days just to get the mission going and set up the base of operations. And then as more troops were brought in, the operations center at the Quincy Armory was, of course, expanded. We brought in S1 personnel to track the people coming in and make sure the payrolls were done right. The aviation people came on board and established their operations center there. We brought the doc on to establish some medical expertise and kind of control that function.
But almost instantly, we put everything we had in Quincy up on the Meyer levee north of Quincy, up south of Warsaw. We kept building on the Myers and the Indian Graves area. And then we moved into Keysburg, Aquaka, Nyota, some of those towns up north. The small towns up on the river that were beginning to start to experience problems, they tried to handle the sandbagging by themselves initially, but it was overwhelming them, so we moved the troops in to help get that done.
Basically, we've been working just all over the levee, just wherever they need help. If there's a weak spot, what they do is they send word and we get on trucks and move back down to other areas of the levee. We've done a lot of sandbagging and stacking. We lay plastic and we transport sandbags and things like that. But basically what we're trying to do is build the levee up just to hold a little more pressure.
Unfortunately, it was not successful in some of them. Like Keithsburg, Nyota had minor problems, but Keithsburg lost 3/4 of their community with water. You move on down to Nyota after about a 2-week fight, even with guard and prisoners there. They lost that fight. They lost that community.
Well, it's hard to see something like this. It's hard to see the flood down here after, the people have been working so hard on it. It doesn't hit home with me because I don't live here, but I hate seeing, the people come down here in tears looking at their houses underwater. It's got to be tough. It's got to be tough to lose your dwelling and all your personal things, but at least everyone's made it out okay. What we're doing here is we're trying to control traffic down to the water area where the water's up to right now. Right now, we've got residents coming down. They have to sign in with us. We check their driver's license, and we record that information, time in, and then we time them out. That will control any looters that want to get down there and go through people's houses.
The Myers and the Indian Grays area north of Quincy were all flooded. Once they're flooded, we pull the troops, the main troops out that doing the sandbagging, leave the MPs or some other security forces there to help maintain the highways, to keep the tourists out, and make sure the property is protected.
I think the Guard has done an excellent job. I think they're doing a job that truthfully is a little thankless in that they have to sit there for long hours at the posts, the ones that are at guard posts. I'm sure they have many irate residents down there because we were making them get passes to get in and out of the flood area. And of course, they're the ones that take the brunt of that, and I think they've handled that very well. The ones that we've had guards people doing sandbagging work, I think those guys, what can you say about that? I'm sure everyone that lives down that area certainly appreciates that. If there's any problems at all, our guys have felt probably a sense of obligation to check on them because we've done that ourselves, been on an isolated post before, and you realize sometimes people forget about you, so we try not to forget about them.
When about the end of the second week, when the big buildup came and we started moving farther south, the Snai got to be a problem, being the second largest river district in the country. We moved a lot of troops into there, about 1,200 of them, to help beef up that 57 miles of levee. By that time, it was beginning to get concerns in Alton, East St. Louis, clear down to Murfreesboro, and we continued to start bringing more troops on in the south and filling those areas in. So as we did that, over about the first 2-week period, majority of it being in the first 10 days, by the 17th, we were up to about 4,600 troops.
Well, in our area, of course, the main problem we have is that so many levee problems. And it's good to see here before the flood happens down in my area of the country, because we're talking about huge areas of agricultural land and a lot of residential homes as well. In fact, the Snai on the southern end of Adams and Pike counties encompasses 110,000 acres. It's the largest drainage district on the Mississippi River. So if we would lose that, which could certainly happen, it's designed, as I understand, most of those levees are designed for a 28-foot crest, and we're looking at 30 feet. So to say the least, we're going to have a long time ahead of us, and to have the Guard here has been a huge help. They've provided a lot of service as far as their personnel to help do the work, and they've also just, if nothing else, provided a real boost for a lot of volunteers. People are just simply wearing out.
Right. My platoon was working down at the Snai levee before we came up here. We worked down there for a week, and as far as we know, that's still holding. And so we're kind of glad of that, since that's where we were working and supporting the levee.
It was very frustrating because, and we worked with a lot of the local people that live in that area. A lot of the farmers were working right on the levee with us, so it was very frustrating because they were working to save their property, and we were working to help save their property also, and it just got very frustrating because just a couple hours before that, they had a very serious problem where we were working, and it was almost to the point where they were going to pull us off because they thought it was going to go then, but through a lot of effort by the men, we got it shored up and we saved it, and they found that hard to believe that we did manage to do that, and then so we were feeling pretty good at that point, and then when it let loose in an area that we weren't even working on and nobody was even looking at the time, it was pretty frustrating.
The night levee patrol is basically they do a kind of like a reconnaissance, and they just go around, they looking for leaks, new boils, checking the old boils, and more or less it's a restricted area. There aren't supposed to be any people in the area, so if there are, they ask them to leave. You don't force them to leave, you just ask them to leave and you continue your mission. Right now, they're riding along the access trail next to the Snide Levee. They're checking for any leaks or really bad seepage using their spotlights. Moving along about 3 miles an hour. Like I said, it takes about 3 hours to make the circuit.
What happens when they find something?
They'll stop, check it out, and report it, and the civilian will make the call on what they do next. If they're going to try to sandbag it, or if they need more help to control it, they'll call that in. There's a reaction team not too far from here, about 10, 15 minutes away. Troops are always got good morale, This is helping the local people, and they really appreciate the help. It's not uncommon for them to come up to you and say thank you for being here. They really appreciate the help.
Well, we've been trying to do as many things as we can in the community to help the Guard because they're helping us, but also to help soften the blow from the terrible devastation that the Mississippi has wrought upon us all. We've felt that it would be more enjoyable for your troops to be eating on the Alton Bell than to be fixing your own meals out of bivouac, so we offered to help in that respect.
Feeding that many soldiers, we're located in about 57, 58 communities up and down the Mississippi, and just getting those people fed 3 times a day has been a major process. It's worked extremely well. The logisticians that we've got have done a superb job in that effort. We fly meals with helicopters to locations. We have some of them that are eating in the local restaurant if it's a small group. If we have a large group, most of them are being cooked by the Army cooks. The Red Cross has fed a few of the isolated areas for us. There's various means that's been done, but it's been done pretty successful after the first 2 or 3 days.
We're staying in Granite City, and we're deployed here in Alton. Well, we're trying our best to try to stop the water from coming into town, and we're just sandbagging all around, and the community's helping, the soldiers are helping, everyone's just all chipping in. But right now, the morale is super. We're really excited about helping the townspeople, and they're real excited about us being here, and they've been cooperating, giving us food and drinks and everything like that.
Because of the Mississippi River being dammed up, or being so high in the Alton area, Grafton area down there, it's causing a pool of water to be backed up the Illinois like a lake. It's acting as a dam, which is raising the Illinois River and causing it to flood, which is now the critical area. This is probably the biggest activation that I've seen in the 30-some years that I've been in the Guard. The only thing bigger than this would have been the riot years back in the 60s and early 70s. Basically, the last 20 years, this is by far the biggest activation we've had, and the longest. It is the longest activation we've had probably since the mine strikes back in the 30s.
Well, there's no question that we're facing probably one of the biggest floods in our history. 17 feet is flood stage, and we're at 28 feet now. and it looks to be going to crest at 31.5, I think, 31.6. And it's, for all practical purposes, the worst flood this region's seen. In my estimation, the Guards made all the difference in the world. Absolutely, unquestionably making the difference of saving our land and our property.
We are, as you can see in this town and the other communities around Illinois, the National Guard is America's community-based defense force. And our job is to respond to community calamities, which this is in many communities up and down the Mississippi River. We respond to community calamities to help maintain or restore domestic tranquility. I tell you, I am very pleased and very proud and impressed with the Illinois National Guard and the superb job that y'all have done helping the citizens of Illinois and helping with as much flood control and the work done on the levees here. I cannot believe the thousands and thousands of sandbags that, of course, a lot of community folks, but the National Guard men and women have been involved in doing. So I'm extremely proud and impressed with the morale and the attitude and taking care of neighbors, helping neighbors.
Basically, that's where our main motivation comes from, is to help the people. It affects me to the point that not so much of the loss of land or the loss of material, but basically it's the people here. You know, you get to the point where you get to know them and that they have real major concerns about the river, about the levee, and it works a two-way street. You know, they're concerned about us and we're concerned about them. And it, you know, as that relationship grows, you know, we basically work harder for them, and vice versa. They work harder for us. And the bottom line is, like I was saying, we're all in it together now. Basically, we are assigned here. This is our levee as well as the town's levee.
There's been a lot of devastation. There's no question about that. It's not a comparison to a hurricane, for example. In a hurricane, you go in and clean it up or save lives. It's over. But this has been a 30-day battle of preparing for the disaster to happen each day. We haven't even got to the cleanup portion. But the devastation, particularly in small communities, has been very heavy. A lot of people out of homes. We've seen houses floating down the river. We've seen houses floating out in the river bottoms, the farmsteads. We've seen buildings out there where the waters actually tore the siding right off of them. They're never going to know how much damage is there until the water goes down. There's schools right now, with school ready to open in about 3 weeks, there's schools right now with 10, 12 foot of water in them. Hull, Illinois is a prime example of that. That's going to take a major cleanup. The schools won't be in operation unless they move them to a temporary location. The highways, the Interstate 336 is underwater. The railroad that goes across the Snai River bottom has been washed out. It's just hard to assess it until the water's gone. The highway system, the bridge systems all have to be evaluated. So there's a lot of hidden costs out there right now that you can't see because of the water being 12, 15 feet deep yet. I think on behalf of the Guard, the thing that will stand out the most is, you know, the last time we had a major flood was 1973. You never forget what you see and learn when you go through one of these experiences. And when you bring the young officers into it the way we have, and the young NCOs into it, you'll find that they're not going to forget it either. But another thing that they've learned out of it, particularly the ones that never had been in a real world operation. You know, you train every day to do your job. You train every day staffs. You train every day officers to do it when it happens. But the training mode versus the operational mode, sometimes there's a gap. And I think we've filled in that gap tremendously in the last 30 days.
As the floodwaters recede, communities begin the task of cleaning up and rebuilding. The Great Flood of '93 set records throughout the upper Mississippi River Basin. Millions of acres of farmland were flooded in the Midwest. Thousands of families were driven from their homes, and the federal government allocated billions of dollars to begin to deal with the losses. And the Illinois National Guard, after weeks of grueling labor side by side with their fellow Illinoisans, began to return to their armories and to their civilian lives, prepared to meet the next challenge which might face Illinois or the nation.